We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind creates stories? Someone changes their tone slightly. A message feels colder than usual. Someone becomes distant for one day, and suddenly your mind starts connecting dots that may not even exist. Maybe they are upset. Maybe they are losing interest. Maybe you did something wrong. And after a while, the story starts feeling real. Your body reacts to it, and suddenly your whole mood changes because of it. But what if the human mind was never built to see reality clearly, but to believe in stories so we can survive? What if most human suffering does not come directly from life itself, but from the meaning the mind constantly attaches to life? Because the strange thing about the mind is this: it does not simply observe reality. It interprets reality, predicts reality, edits reality. And sometimes, the story it creates hurts us more than reality itself. Most people move through life assuming they see things objectively. But the mind does not work like a camera. It does not passively record reality exactly as it is. Long before you consciously understand what is happening, your brain is already interpreting it. Neuroscientist Carl Friston proposed that the brain constantly predicts the world around us. Instead of waiting for reality and then reacting, the brain tries to predict what is happening before you fully understand it. Which means what you experience is not just what happened, it is what your mind believes is happening. And once you notice this, you start seeing it everywhere. You walk into a room and immediately feel something is off. Nobody actually said anything, but your mind already started reading facial expressions, silence, body language, energy. And within seconds, a story begins forming. Sometimes the story is true. Sometimes it is not. But your emotional reaction often begins before you even know what is true. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman explained that human beings tend to think in two different ways. One is fast, automatic, emotional, and instinctive. The other is slower, more careful, and analytical. But most of the time, people react before they fully reflect. Because the human mind is designed to react quickly. Long before you consciously think things through, your brain is already trying to decide, is this safe? Is something wrong? What does this mean? And most of the time, it makes those judgments almost instantly. Not because the mind is irrational, but because for most of human history, slow uncertainty could mean danger. And this explains so much human behavior. Why people reread messages, overanalyze silence, replay conversations at night, assume rejection too quickly. Sometimes someone simply becomes quieter for one day. That is all that happened. But the mind struggles to leave uncertainty alone. So it starts filling the silence with narrative. Something changed. They are upset. They are losing interest. I must have done something wrong. And the longer uncertainty lasts, the more real the story starts to feel. Because the mind would often rather create a painful explanation than remain in uncertainty. And once the narrative begins, the body starts responding to it as if it were already real. This is where things become dangerous. Because emotions can make interpretations feel true. Neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett argues that the brain is constantly trying to make sense of what the body is feeling. And sometimes, the story your mind creates becomes the emotion itself. Which means sometimes, your body reacts before you even stop to question the story. You think, maybe they are pulling away. Then anxiety appears. Your chest tightens. Your stomach sinks. Your nervous system becomes alert. And suddenly, the feeling itself becomes evidence. You start thinking, if I feel this strongly, it must be real. But feelings do not always reveal objective truth. Sometimes they reveal what the mind is predicting. And many people unknowingly spend years reacting not to reality itself, but to interpretations reinforced by emotion. Historian Yuval Noah Harari argues in *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind* that human beings organize society through shared stories. Money, nations, religion, social systems. These things exist because enough people collectively believe in them. But this does not only happen socially, it also happens internally. People don't only live through external stories, they live through internal ones too. Stories like, I'm not enough, people always leave, I ruin relationships, nobody truly understands me. At first, these are just thoughts. But after enough repetition, they stop feeling like thoughts. They start feeling like identity. And the frightening part is, most people never realize it is happening. Because after a while, you stop seeing situations clearly. You start seeing them through the story you already believe about yourself. Someone takes longer to reply. A confident person may think, they're probably busy. But someone carrying the narrative, people eventually leave, may immediately experience fear, anxiety, or rejection. Same event, different narrative, different reality. Which means two people can live through the exact same moment and emotionally experience two completely different worlds. The mind does not only seek understanding, it also seeks psychological stability. Social psychologist Leon Festinger described something called cognitive dissonance. When reality conflicts with our beliefs or self-image, the mind becomes deeply uncomfortable. And often, instead of changing the belief immediately, the mind tries to protect the existing narrative. This is why people sometimes stay in relationships that clearly hurt them, not because they cannot see the problem, but because accepting reality may force them to confront something much more painful. Maybe their attachment, their identity, their fear of being alone, the story they built around love. So the mind starts softening reality. It's not that bad. They still care. Maybe I'm overreacting. Sometimes people do not resist reality because they are weak. They resist it because reality threatens the story that keeps them emotionally stable. Modern life makes this even harder. Because today, the human mind is surrounded by endless emotional stimulation. People wake up and immediately check their phones. And before the day even begins, the mind has already started comparing, measuring, and judging itself. Social media constantly gives people new material to build narratives from. You compare your life, your appearance, your success, your relationships. And slowly, the mind begins constructing an invisible story about your value, sometimes without you even noticing. You see someone happier online, and your mind quietly translates it into, I'm behind. You see someone more successful, and suddenly you think, maybe I'm wasting my life. The modern world does not only influence what people think, it influences the stories people repeat to themselves every single day. And repeated narratives slowly shape identity. So what do we do with all of this? The answer is not to eliminate every thought. That is impossible. The human mind naturally creates interpretations and narratives. The goal is not to become emotionless, and it is not to control every thought that appears in your head. Real maturity begins when you create space between reality and your interpretation of reality. When you stop immediately obeying every fearful story the mind creates. When you can pause long enough to ask, is this reality? Or is this the narrative my mind is automatically constructing? Because once you can see the story clearly, you stop being completely controlled by it. The moment you recognize the story, you create distance between yourself and the story. And that distance changes everything. Maybe freedom is not having a perfectly quiet mind. Maybe freedom begins when you stop unconsciously living inside every story your mind creates. Not every thought is reality, and not every story deserves to become your identity.